Today we're talking about Minnesota, fraud, and a massive federal enforcement operation involving 2,000 plus ICE agents. And if you're trying to figure out how those things connect, that's because they don't. Let's follow the numbers. Here's what we know about fraud in Minnesota. The Feeding Our Future case, the big one, involved $250 million in confirmed fraud. That's massive. It's the largest pandemic relief fraud scheme in U.S. history. 78 people have been indicted. Over 50 have pleaded guilty. 7 were convicted at trial. The government has recovered about $75 million so far. The rest was spent on luxury cars, real estate, international travel, the usual fraud playbook. There have been additional charges in housing assistance and autism services programs, totaling maybe another 5 to 6 million in the most recent December indictments. So confirmed fraud through actual convictions and charges, roughly 250 to 300 million total. But you've probably heard a very different number, $9 billion. Let me show you how we got there. In December, Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Thompson said that 14 Medicaid programs had been audited, and that half or more of $18 billion billed since 2018 was possibly fraudulent. Let's break that down. Possibly fraudulent, not confirmed. Half or more, not a precise figure. $18 billion, that's total billing across 14 programs over 7 years. All providers, not just those charged. So that $9 billion estimate includes programs still under audit, services that might have been legitimately provided, and the word possibly doing Olympic-level heavy lifting. The difference between 250 million confirmed and 9 billion possibly, that's a 35 times inflation. There's a lot of room between those numbers. But you've probably heard a very different number, $9 billion. Let me show you how we got there. In December, Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Thompson said that 14 Medicaid programs have been audited and that half or more of $18 billion billed since 2018 was possibly fraudulent. Let's break that down. Possibly fraudulent, not confirmed. Half or more, not a precise figure. $18 billion. That's total billing across 14 programs over 7 years. All providers, not just those charged. So that $9 billion estimate includes programs still under audit, services that might have been legitimately provided, and the word possibly doing Olympic-level heavy lifting. The difference between 250 million confirmed and 9 billion possibly, that's a 35 times inflation. There's a lot of room between those numbers. And here's the thing, fraud in government programs isn't unique to Minnesota. In June 2025, there was a national healthcare fraud takedown, the largest in U.S. history. $14.6 billion in fraudulent schemes, 324 defendants charged across 50 federal districts. Texas alone had 48 defendants charged. Florida had multiple districts with dozens of cases. One Richardson, Texas resident allegedly submitted $93 million in false Medicare claims using stolen physician identities. The cases involved licensed medical professionals, 96 doctors, nurse practitioners, and pharmacists, running schemes from genetic testing fraud to prescription opioid trafficking. One case involved transnational criminal organizations that submitted over $12 billion in fraudulent claims. $14.6 billion nationwide, involving American doctors and pharmacists. Did we deploy 2,000 federal agents to Texas? Did we see massive enforcement operations in Florida? Are we talking about occupying Houston? No. So let's talk about who actually committed the fraud in Minnesota. 92 people have been indicted across all the Minnesota fraud cases. 82 of them are Somali American. That's 89%. But here's what's critical. The vast majority are American citizens. The demographics of Minnesota's Somali community tell you why. Nearly 58% were born in the United States. Of the foreign-born Somalis, 87% are naturalized U.S. citizens. The ringleader of Feeding Our Future, Amy Bach, a white woman, U.S. citizen. The fraud tourists from Pennsylvania who traveled to Minnesota to exploit housing programs. Anthony Waddell Jefferson and Lester Brown, American citizens from Philadelphia. I found zero evidence that any undocumented immigrants were charged in any of these fraud cases. Zero. This fraud was committed by Americans. Full stop. So naturally, the response was to deploy 2,000 plus ICE agents. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency whose job is to deport undocumented immigrants, deployed to investigate fraud committed by American citizens. Let's talk about what that operation cost. Hotel costs alone, at least $360,000 per night, over $10 million for a 30-day stay, $85,000 spent just on parkas, $50,000 signing bonuses per officer, part of $170 billion allocated to immigration enforcement overall. For comparison, that's about 3 times what the state of Minnesota spends per year on education, healthcare, and roads combined. So what fraud did this massive operation uncover? Zero. Nothing. Not a single case. After the viral video claimed daycare centers were fraudulent, state inspectors visited them. What did they find? The centers were operating as expected. Children were present at all sites except one that wasn't open yet for the day. None of the daycares in the video had formal allegations of fraud against them. Meanwhile, we learned that Minnesota was already cooperating. The Minnesota Department of Corrections was honoring ICE detainers, coordinating scheduled custody transfers every day, documenting everything. And DHS took those routine cooperative transfers and falsely claimed they were dramatic arrests by their deployed agents. The state identified 68 cases where DHS lied about this to inflate their numbers. Here's the thing. If this were actually about fraud, you wouldn't send ICE agents. You'd send accountants, auditors, FBI financial crimes investigators, IRS criminal investigation. The people who actually investigated and built the cases that led to those 78 indictments. Fraud investigations require forensic accounting, document analysis, tracing financial flows. That's not what ICE does. ICE doesn't investigate financial fraud. They enforce immigration law. The Trump administration has been very clear about this. Trump called Somali immigrants garbage who contribute nothing. He said he doesn't want them in the country. He terminated temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota, affecting a few hundred people. This operation was launched after a viral video by a right-wing YouTuber who previously built a following with anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim videos. Vice President J.D. Vance shared it, Elon Musk shared it, and within days, 2,000 agents were deployed. 2 American citizens have been killed during this operation, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Thousands have been arrested. A 5-year-old boy was detained. U.S. citizens have been tackled and held in chokeholds for looking Somali. Schools closed, businesses shut down, an entire community terrorized, all based on fraud committed by American citizens in amounts far smaller than fraud happening nationwide, to justify deportation operations that have nothing to do with the actual fraud. Let me put this in perspective. Minnesota fraud confirmed, 250 to 300 million committed by U.S. citizens. Federal response, 2,000 plus agents, tens of millions spent, 2 dead, massive enforcement operation. National healthcare fraud, $14.6 billion, 324 defendants, American doctors and medical professionals. Federal response, normal prosecutions, press releases, business as usual. The math doesn't add up because this isn't about math. It's not about fraud. It's not about public safety. if you're looking for a connection between the Minnesota fraud and the ICE operation, you won't find one, because there isn't one. The fraud was real. The prosecutions were legitimate. The convictions stand. But the enforcement response? That's political theater with a body count. They inflated the numbers by 35 times. They deployed immigration agents to investigate crimes committed by citizens. They spent tens of millions to discover zero new fraud. They lied about state cooperation. They terrorized a community that is overwhelmingly American. And when you compare it to how we handle fraud anywhere else, including far larger fraud committed by American doctors, the scapegoating becomes impossible to miss. This is what it looks like when you use law enforcement, not to enforce the law, but to punish a community for existing. The numbers tell you everything you need to know. I'm Machine Pun Kelly, and thanks for watching. If you learned something, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. What do you think? What is the real reason for this operation terrorizing the streets of Minneapolis?